Welcome to the Brook Street Band at home. I'd love to introduce the wonderful violinist Kathryn Parry, who's going to be telling us about the violin today. Now, Kathryn is a hugely experienced musician who works with orchestras and chamber groups around the world. And we're very proud that you, Kathryn, are a member of the Brook Street Band. So thank you. And thank you. You're also a brilliant teacher working in music education, and you create joy and enthusiasm and passion for the violin and music in everything you do. So we're delighted that you're going to introduce the violin to us today. Over the next 6 weeks, we'll be introducing the violin family, the flute and the recorder family, and the flute and recorder will be introduced by our woodwind specialist Lisette de Silva Bull starting next Saturday. We're going to alternate violin and woodwind sessions every other Saturday, and we very much hope you'll log on for some or all of these sessions and learn a little bit about these wonderful instruments as we go. But thank you, and for now I'm going to hand over to you, Kathryn.
Thank you so much, Tatty, and hello everybody. Thank you very much for joining me at home in Suffolk. I hope you're feeling really good today, and perhaps you can think of something really positive that has happened to you, something that's made you happy during lockdown. You've been at home for a very long time. My positive is that my 3 grown-up children, who I thought had left me forever, have been living here with us in Suffolk, and we've had a lot of fun. Although last week we hit a low point when we ran out of cake. That was very serious. So I'm delighted to be here today to talk to you about the violin. We're going to have a very quick and not very scientific tour around the instrument, and we're going to try and explore how it works and how it makes a sound and changes the sound that it makes. But first I thought I'd play you a short piece just so you can hear what the violin actually sounds like. This is a Scottish tune. It's actually quite a sad and melancholy tune about a young girl who's been abandoned by her boyfriend. But it brings back happy memories for me because we had a wonderful time living in Edinburgh when our children were very tiny. And so it's a lovely, positive tune for me. It's called Ye Banks and Braes, and it's by Robert Burns. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how sound is made, and I need another instrument for that. This is an instrument I made earlier. So I've got an elastic band and a cardboard box. You could even make one of these yourself at home. So all sound, as I'm sure you know, is made up of vibration, which travels through the air. All musical instruments make vibrations, and then they amplify them in different ways to make the sounds louder. They can also play at different frequencies, which is the notes that they play and the different pitches. So if I ping this elastic band, can you see that vibrating? And if you listen carefully, you might hear it's making a musical note. It's quite low, this one. But if I stretch my elastic band over a cardboard box, let's see what happens. Can Can you hear that? It makes a musical note. It's much higher in pitch, isn't it? And the air inside the box is actually vibrating, and I can feel the sides in the back of the box buzzing while I pluck the elastic band. So that's basically how sound is amplified with a box of air. I've got 3 elastic bands on my box. Let's pluck them all and see what they sound like. Oh, so I do that again. So they all play different notes. This one's the highest. This is the lowest. And the one in the middle. Now, why, I wonder, do they play different notes? Is it because they're different colours? No. It's because they're different sized elastic bands. I happen to have 3 elastic bands of different sizes. This one's the smallest, so I had to stretch it very, very tightly to fit over my cardboard box. And this one, which you can also see is quite thick, isn't it? It's sort of loose and floppy. So the tighter I pull the elastic band, the higher the note. Three different pitches, 3 different frequencies. That's my cardboard box instrument. Now let's show you the violin, which is just a different shaped box of air, which vibrates when my 4 strings are plucked or bowed and make a sound. One of the things I love about the violin is that the shape of it hasn't really changed for hundreds of years since the violin first emerged in around the 16th century. One of my brothers, his name's David, and he actually went to a special college in Newark in Nottinghamshire, and they specialise in making stringed instruments there, violins, and it's a very famous place to go and study. And his teachers taught him to actually copy old instruments from Italy from hundreds and hundreds of years ago. I think probably no one has really improved on this shape to get the best sound from a violin. Those instruments from hundreds of years ago are worth, well, they're priceless works of art actually, and they can be worth millions of pounds. But basically they work like a cardboard box with an elastic band. This violin is made of wood, and these strings are definitely not elastic. They have to be much tighter and more rigid so the notes are consistent, so they're the same all the time. And if I pluck my 4 strings, I'll hold the violin right up to the camera. Hopefully you can see the string vibrating. That's my lowest string. It's also the thickest, like the blue elastic band. And then as the strings get tighter and thinner, the notes go up. And they're all musical notes. This is G, D, A, and E at the top. And the vibrations travel along the string down the bridge here. It's actually shaped like a bridge. It's got a beautiful curve in it. Along the top of the instrument, it's called the front, sometimes the belly. Then there's a special post inside which can carry the vibrations from the front right to the back of the instrument. I'll just show you the beautiful grain of the wood of the back of that violin. Isn't it lovely? And there are also holes at the front. All stringed instruments have these. And they actually look like a letter, don't they? They look like an F. They're called the F holes. So I'm doing a lot of plucking with my fingers. And in string playing terms, we have a very special word for that. It's an Italian word, and it's called pizzicato. Can you say that? Pizzicato. We often say pizz. So I can pizz with my right hand, normally my index finger. I can also use my left hand fingers if my right hand's busy doing something else. composers actually ask for both, and they have special symbols that they write in the music to indicate which one they want us to do. So, back to the violin, that each string is attached to its own peg, sometimes called tuning pegs. And if I let down one of the strings, so make it looser, this is what happens to the pitch. So the string is looser, the notes are getting lower. If I tighten the string, I can get it up to pitch. It's very important that our strings, our open strings, what we call them, are exactly the right pitch, especially for playing with other people. We have to make sure our instruments are all playing the same notes. But it's quite a difficult thing. It would be very hard to play a tune just using my pegs. It would take far too long. So you'll have noticed when I did play my tune earlier that I was using the fingers of my left hand. And my fingers just join up the gap between the open strings. Let's have a listen. So we count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's a gap of a fifth, we call it. It's actually a perfect fifth. When I press my fingers on the string, the pressure of my fingers, trying not to press too hard, is actually stopping the string vibrating a little bit. This bit underneath my finger is still, and the vibrating length of the string is getting shorter, and that's why the notes are going up. So there are lots of pieces that start with those notes. I thought of one the other day. Oh, this one, very famous piece. That's Bach's double violin concerto. And then this one you might know. That's by Grieg, a Norwegian composer. It's called The Hall of the Mountain King. And then if I want to go back down the other way and take my fingers off so the notes get lower, it's another piece by Bach, an organ piece, a prelude in D minor. I think I can demonstrate even better how as the string length gets shorter, the notes get higher. If I slide my finger up from the bottom here, up to the top, that goes really high. I'll go down again, and the vibrating length of the string is getting bigger. So although the bottom note of my violin is G, I can't go down any lower than G. I can go up really, really high. The fingers at the top of the fingerboard have to be very, very close together. And that's a scientific reason that I don't understand. But if I could show you another instrument here, you might have seen one of these before. It's a ukulele. And the ukulele has frets on it. We on violins and other stringed instruments, we have to make our own notes. I'll talk about that in just a second. But can you see that the frets at the top of the fingerboard here are really close together? Each one plays a semitone. Very, very close together. And these lower ones are further apart. So the spaces between the fingers are absolutely crucial when you play a stringed instrument, and it is one of the most difficult and challenging things to get the fingers in the right place every single time. It's probably the thing I find most difficult. I struggle with it no matter how much I practice, but it is very important. I think it's mainly to do with listening really carefully. Something to do with muscle memory. If I practice many, many times, my finger learns where it has to go on the string. But mainly it's to do with listening to my colleagues and also to the way my own violin vibrates, because there are certain notes, the notes that correspond with the open strings, that will always resonate best when they're exactly in tune. So that is a very, very quick whistle-stop tour around the violin. You'll have noticed, I'm sure, that I've been doing a lot of pizzicato, and I haven't mentioned my bow at all. And you're absolutely right. The bow is how we make magic on a stringed instrument. It's how we use different voices. It's how we play with different expressions and make different feelings. It's how we paint different colours. And I think it's so important that I want to give it a whole session all to itself next time. So please come back in 2 weeks' time. Come next week and meet Lisette and hear about some woodwind instruments, but please do come back in 2 weeks' time and find out about the bow. I promise I'll take one to pieces for you and put it back together and show you how it makes my strings vibrate in different ways. So Brook Street Band at Home, this is a family workshop, and I would love to introduce you to another member of the violin family. The violin has several relations, and I would also love to introduce you to my lovely daughter Imogen, who has brought, hello, another instrument with her. We're going to hold them up together. Oh, I'm down a little bit. Yeah. And I hope you can see they're not only different colours, but also different sizes. So they're different colours because whoever made these instruments just painted them with different coloured varnish, but they're different sizes because this is called a viola. It's like a sort of cousin or big brother or sister to the violin. And Imogen actually doesn't play the viola very much anymore. She's a professional singer, but I think you had lots of fun playing at school in orchestras and in ensembles. And what she loved was being in the middle of the texture. It's a bit like a choir when you've got singers of soprano, alto, tenor and bass all singing different parts. And that's basically what the string family is all about. So I'm going to pluck my open strings. And I'll ask Imogen to do the same. Oh, can you do that again? Whoa. Can you all hear that? Excuse me.
I like having low notes.
It's a bigger instrument and it plays lower strings. I'm going to play my bottom note, and then Imogen's going to play down the scale to play you all the notes that she's got that I haven't got.
So I have that note as well, and then I have...
And the notes are G, F, E, D and C. The bottom string is C. I'm a little bit jealous. There are actually violins that have 5 strings, so they can play even more notes. They go down to C as well, and I think they're used in a lot of kind of pop bands and folk bands and things like that. So we would love to finish now by playing a little piece together. It's a duet. It's also from Scotland, and it's a dance called a strathspey. It's got lots of jaunty dotted rhythms, and of course you can clap your hands or you can even dance if you know the steps to the strathspey. I want you to listen out for Imogen's low notes. It's partly why we've chosen this piece. Also because it's called orange and blue, and happens to be our favourite colours. Please do, if you have any questions or comments, Tatty's waiting there. She's fielding the comments and the questions, and we'll have a few minutes at the end and I'll answer as many as I can. Thank you so much. Here is Orange and Blue. you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Kathryn. That was absolutely wonderful. And Imogen, thank you for giving up your Saturday morning and coming to join us too. That was wonderful. And loving the orange and blue. We're a yellow household. We love yellow in our household. Yellow and blue. But orange is also pretty high up the list of acceptable colours. That was so lovely, and to see both the instruments together, because it's all very well talking about them, but hearing them and seeing them in such close proximity is absolutely wonderful. Kathryn, you never fail to amaze me with your enthusiasm and passion for communicating the violin and how much you love it and the repertoire. It's infectious. I never learned the violin. I'm a cellist, but now I wish I had. But I can see we've got a question come up on the chat function. I'm having a look. I don't know if you can see the chat, Kathryn, so I'll read it out.
Thank you.
Do you have a desert island piece of music to recommend to us?
My goodness, that's a really, really brilliant question. And it's something that I think about a lot. Of course, it's really hard to choose just one piece. And, oh gosh, it's so hard. I think one piece that I love, because it means a lot to people in my family, my dad, who's still alive, he's 95 in 2 weeks' time, and he loves opera. And when I started playing the violin, he dreamed of me playing the Meditation from the opera Thais by Massenet. And it's something that I have played. I've played to him. I've played it at his 90th birthday party, actually. And I absolutely love, there's a recording on YouTube of Nicola Benedetti, of whom I'm a huge fan, by the way, playing with an orchestra, and it's totally magical. I also love, if I can do another plug for Alina Ibragimova, who has recorded all the unaccompanied Bach partitas and sonatas, as has our own wonderful Rachel Harris. Actually, her recording is completely fantastic. So those are two pieces or recordings that I would take to my desert island, definitely. If I'm allowed to take two. Am I allowed to?
Definitely you can take two. I think normally you're allowed 8, but 2 is fine. I should just point out, it's really interesting, Kathryn, you mentioning Alina Ibragimova and Rachel, and I've just seen another question which actually leads into what I was going to mention, because Rachel's recording is we in Brook Street Band, we perform on instruments appropriate to sort of the 17th or 18th century, so we're using different kind of strings normally. So Rachel's violin sonatas and partitas recording is using gut strings, whereas today you played on, and this ties into the question from Ursula, actually. What were your strings today? And
okay, that's also a really, really good question. Yes, you're absolutely right, Tati. In the Brook Street Band, I would play on a different instrument with a different setup from the Baroque period, so from the 17th century. Ironically, my Baroque violin is actually a modern copy of an old instrument by Jakob Steiner, which is the same as I think Johann Sebastian Bach used to play. But this violin, it's actually very old and Italian, but it's actually in modern setup. So these strings, that's a very good question. Thank you, Ursula. These strings are actually synthetic. They've got, I think the top one is silver, and the 3 lower strings have got a sort of plastic core, and they've got metal wound around them very, very tightly. But in Brook Street Band, we play on gut strings. They're actually from sheep gut and from mutton. Yeah, that is sheep, isn't it? And from beef, that's right. So they're obviously treated and wound very, very tightly. Oh, and Tati's got her cello there.
You can see. I don't know if the camera will pick up my cello, because for some reason I can't see myself. Let's try.
I can see you.
Okay, yeah.
Beautifully, yeah.
Probably can't see, because I know Kathryn in future weeks is going to come to the other instruments of the Violin Family, and I can see temptingly right behind you an amazing looking double bass. I've got my Baroque cello here, and the top 2 strings are made of unwound, uncovered gut, and the bottom 2 are gut with silver on, which is a more historically appropriate kind of stringing. I'm sure we'll come to strings and all sorts in future sessions.
Thank you.
I've got a couple of other questions actually. Let me just call those back again. A question from Lucy. What is the hardest piece you've ever played?
Oh, hi, Lucy. Wow, that's a really, really good question. You know, when I was learning the violin, when I was much, much younger, I seemed to be fearless. And I remember learning, you know, pieces that were incredibly virtuosic. There's a set of studies, Caprices by Paganini, and I remember trying to play these, not very well. And now when I pick up the music, I picked it up the other day, how did I ever get anywhere near that? I think there are different things to think about here, aren't there? There are really technically difficult pieces, and then there are more sort of intellectual, musical difficulties in some pieces. But oh golly, I think probably Paganini Caprices are, well, I find them impossible now. I used to have a go.
Kathryn, I've got lots of questions coming in. It's brilliant.
Great.
I've got one from Leanne. Let me just call the question up again. But actually, it's from Zoe, who I believe is possibly considering learning the violin. She's little. She's perhaps 6, I think. How did you get so good at playing the violin?
Oh, thank you, Zoe. That's a really, really good question. I think, golly, I have to be very modest. There are a lot of violinists who are much, much better than I am. Oh dear, I'm almost ashamed. But I think I had to practice. I probably didn't practice as much as I should have done. I was practicing quite hard this morning before the session to play my little folk tune in tune. But I've also been really lucky to play with some fantastic people. And I have to say, when I started playing with the Brook Street Band, they are incredible musicians, and they're so spontaneously wonderful and inventive. And I learn from them every time we play together, not just technically, but also how to play musically and how to relate together musically. But there's no doubt about it that the more often you practice, the more confident you are. So we practice once to kind of find out what it's like, and then twice to sort of get it right, and then 3 times and you think, oh well, that's good enough. But then you need to practice another 30 times, and that's your insurance policy. And I try and tell my students, you can practice it till it's right, or you can practice it until it doesn't go wrong. And it's really hard. When I actually practice what I tell them, it does work. The more often you do something, the more you repeat something. But I also think I've been very lucky to play with some very, very inspirational people. Thank you, Zoe.
I've got one more question actually, Kathryn. If you've got time,
Absolutely.
It's an interesting one actually, because looking at the double bass behind you, I can see the scroll looks different, the top of it compared to your violin. And this is, oh gosh, even more questions. Well, I've got 2 then. So I've got one from Solomon and one from Nathaniel. So Solomon's question is, have you ever played a violin made from something other than wood, and did it sound different? And it's actually he's put quite a few questions in one actually.
Okay.
Why are the F holes F-shaped, and does the F make a different sound to other shapes or letters?
Gosh, Solly, really, really good questions. Wow. So I have played violins made of different materials. In fact, in the next 2 sessions, I mentioned that I got 3 grown-up children, and they just happen to play stringed instruments. So we've already met Imogen with her viola, and I'm going to be introducing you to my other children who play the cello. And that is a double bass over there. It's not a traditional shape like this. It's actually an electric bass. So it needs a different amplifier, separate amplifier, an electric one. But we'll be talking about that probably in 2 weeks' time. But I think I've played violins made of plastic, and I think the principle is the same. If it's a vibration which is amplified in some way, you can pretty much make a violin out of anything. And in fact, I saw the most incredible video. It was sent to me at the beginning of lockdown, and it's about an orchestra, I think it's in Paraguay, and they make instruments out of landfill. I think it's actually called the Landfill Orchestra. They live next to this huge landfill site, and they take the trash and they recycle it into instruments. And I really recommend that you put it into Google and have a look, because these instruments are making a sound, and young people mainly are learning how to play together. They do have proper bows, I noticed, so perhaps they had a big donation. Lots of musicians have in the past collaborated and got together and helped people in other countries who really, really are desperate to play stringed instruments. But I think the principle is the same, that if it's a vibrating string and it has an amplifier, it kind of counts as a stringed instrument. Thank you. I don't know if I addressed all the questions. But
Actually, so we'll come back to the F holes, but I've got a question from Nathaniel, who says, how old were you when you started playing the violin?
Oh, that's a really good question as well. I was 9 years old, and I'm very old now. And I'm old enough that we were incredibly lucky when I was a child that music lessons were free in schools. And it doesn't happen these days, and we're not going to get political, but that's why I started playing the violin. At my primary school, the most heavenly, beautiful, lovely lady would come to our school once a week. And when I had to try out for the violin, we didn't have enough to go round. And so we just had to sort of put exercise books under our chins and walk around the room. And I'm not going to lie, I was really good at that, carrying my book underneath my chin. And so that's how it started. I confess my elder brothers, 2 brothers, had been through the same system and learnt the violin. And so that's how I started. I was 9, and I know that's probably quite late by today's standards. But I think it was carrying the book under my chin. I knew I was onto a good thing there.
Well, I could just add, Kathryn, when we're not in lockdown situations, actually going into schools and giving concerts for young people is something we very much enjoy doing, and trying to get as much music into schools, because it's just such a wonderful thing to be able to do and experience. And as you say, a little bit of practice regularly makes such a difference. You know, I'm always telling my pupils and my kids, you know, do little and often, do 15 minutes every day or 10 minutes every day. This is when you're quite little, rather than leaving it just for the day before the lesson and trying to do an hour, because it doesn't really sink in that way, does it? It's just small.
And it's also, it is, as I said before, it is a confidence thing. You're going to feel so much better going to your lesson if you're confident about something, rather than feeling a bit embarrassed because you can't do it.
Yes.
And I think you're right. You know, when we go into primary schools and we talk to the children and we get them to make music together, they're feeling something. You know, music is what your feelings sound like, isn't it? And so we're incredibly lucky to have the skills, the toolbox, to be able to express that. And I was just very fortunate, I think, that it was all free and handed to me.
And it's music we've of course turned to in lockdown situations. You know, I'm not sure where people would be without the internet, without music, without films to watch, books to read. It's all these cultural things which has been so enriching. I've got one question actually. It's from Samson about the shape of the F holes.
Oh yes, sorry.
And yeah, because they're not always F hole shaped, are they? Certainly
they're not always F hole shaped. I'm trying to think. I've seen violins. In fact, I was watching someone playing Eubanks and Brace yesterday on the internet, and her violin was shaped. It didn't have these lovely C curves here and these points. It was much smoother, and I'm sure her they might have even been shaped like long C's. I'm not sure. I just go back to they've never really improved on this. I don't know whether it would not be as good to have a different letter, but they kind of stick to what they know now.
It looks beautiful. I've seen Cs, but that's usually on medieval earlier instruments. I don't know if the shape of the letter affects the amount of sound that comes out. I mean, it must do to a degree, but then again, electronic instruments don't even have the F holes, do they? Because you'll show us on the bass later on. It's a solid, it works in a very different way. But no, I'm a string player as well, and there's something. The form of the violin is one of the most beautiful shapes, I think. The violin, the viola, and the cello, of course. Double basses can look slightly different. They're not as uniform in shape often, but we'll come to that. I'm just checking and see if we've got any more questions. I'm just trying to work out the computer here. No, I think we've covered everything. So it just remains for me to thank you, Kathryn. That was an absolutely brilliant way to spend my Saturday morning.
Thank you so much.
No, I learn more and more about the instrument every time, and considering I'm a professional string player, there's always stuff to learn.
Well, I just repeat, and none of it is scientifically fact checked, I'm afraid. So,
okay. But thank you. Really, really wonderful introduction to the instrument. Do come back and join us. Next week, we've got Lisette de Silverball with her Baroque flute, her modern metal flute, and an entire family of recorders.
Wow.
The Violin Family has 3 or 4, violin, viola, cello, and double bass, 4 members. The recorder family is the largest, I believe. I'm sure Lisette will correct me next week if I'm wrong, but it's the largest family of instruments. She has a huge number of recorders. And it's often an instrument that doesn't get a good press because kids have to learn it in school and don't necessarily enjoy it initially or don't make the best sound, but it's an incredibly beautiful instrument. And so I'm looking forward to hearing more and more and letting Lisette set the scene for just how wonderful and beautiful the recorder and all the different sizes of recorder can be and what wonderful repertoire they can play. So do come back. I believe this link will work for all the sessions, but I will be in touch via email just to double check that everyone has the correct link. Because we're new to webinars. This is a new thing for us. So thank you so much, Kathryn. And
you're so welcome.
You soon. And thank you to Imogen if she's still here or if she's.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Imogen. And we'll see you next week with Lisette at the same time, 11 o'clock.
Brilliant. Thanks, Hattie.
Thank you, Kathryn and Imogen.
Bye. Bye, everybody. Bye.